Welcome to Nothing But the Truth podcast with your hosts, Bob Bianchi and Dave Bruno, two lawyers out here in New Jersey, talking mainly about mindset, every now and again about law and true crime. We have an awesome, amazing guest. Pre-interview, we're vibing immediately. Dave?
Yeah, we have veteran investigative journalist David Scott. He's the recipient of a Peabody Award, 2 Columbia DuPont batons, and 14 Emmy Awards. David is best known for his compelling, direct interviewing style as the host of Court TV's most watched, award-winning original series, Interview with a Killer, where David sits down with convicted killers and death row inmates seeking to uncover the motives and mindsets that led them to these individuals to commit murder. He has 20 episodes, guys, available, and he is still producing. In fact, the new one comes out on May 31st. He's in his 4th season, and you could watch those episodes on Court TV, the website, the YouTube page, and on the Scripps platform. So it is our pleasure to welcome David Scott to Nothing But the Truth.
Welcome, David.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here. Appreciate it.
Yes, I got to ask you, see, I, as a former homicide prosecutor and a person who does homicide cases now, Dave as well, we see it from a different vantage point. And I've always said that the interesting thing about being a homicide prosecutor is that when a murder occurs, you're jumping into the lives of these victims and these defendants in a way that no one else really can. We have their phones and their data and their search histories and their sexual proclivities, if they're that or this, and all the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I used to say to my prosecutors all the time, when I ran the prosecutor's office, like, look at the story behind the story. There's so much about humanity and about life that you can learn. And the one advantage point that we don't have that you've got, which immediately jumped out at me, is while we were doing that all from a forensic point of view, and maybe we would get the last murder case that Dave and I self-tried. We got the defendant on the stand for 3 days. Fascinating. But what we didn't get was the opportunity to sit down with them and in a voluntary environment tell us what made them tick. So you've got that insight. Tell me, what have you learned about yourself even, or about life, or about people from these interviews?
Yeah. Well, you've just articulated the controlling idea of the whole show, the mindset and motivations behind their actions in this case. And the reason the show is successful is because it is, unlike almost everything else in true crime, we're telling these stories through the lens of the antagonist because we have access to the killer. But the primary narrative device is the good old-fashioned hardball interview. So every single episode, every case we cover, the stakes are the highest, life and death. And the tension is the highest, is intense, because we are inside the mind of the man or the woman who has committed the greatest betrayal of humanity, the taking of another human life. And it is a formula that's that's very compelling, and I can see what you're saying. Like you cover these cases, and some of what we do borrows from what you do. If you watch our interviews, they are part law enforcement, part forensic psychology, part journalism. We borrow directly from what detectives and prosecutors do, that's kind of like the magic formula of the show. The question, what have I learned about myself, is, I'm laughing because it is the hardest question to answer. I was at CrimeCon last year, and in the Q&A after our session, somebody came to the mic and I was stumped because I'm still trying to figure it out. I've learned more about humanity. I'd say, like, one thing that I've learned is that all of these cases, it's not just one bad decision. It's often years and years of bad decisions that put the person in the position to commit this ultimate crime. And that's something that's sort of really registered with me on through this work. You know, I I ask myself now all the time, what does it all tell me about me? And I still haven't come up with a good enough answer, and I don't want to like waste your time.
Mm. You know, David, I think the number one question from a lot of people is going to be, most people are trying to avoid going to jail. Meanwhile, you are voluntarily going into jail, not only behind the walls of the institution, but across from a convicted killer. And I would imagine, that gets the heart pumping, and it's not the safest place to be sitting either. I wonder what's going through your mind, especially the first couple when you're doing that for the first time.
Yeah, great question, Dave. Every episode we're telling two stories. One is the crime story, and the other is our sort of journey, into the netherworld that is the supermax prison. And it's fascinating. You guys have seen it yourself. But for most people, I take a minute to just paint a picture, right? So you get there after being fully vetted, and you go through what they call the Sally Port, and it's like a large area, maybe the size of a freight elevator, and one door doesn't close until the other one opens, and vice versa. So it's like the portal into this other world. Once you're on the other side of that, you'll see a sign that says no hostages beyond this point. That basically means that, if anything goes sideways, there's no rescue. You can immediately feel how combustible the environment is. Invariably, there's a chronic shortage of correction staff in American prisons. We've been in institutions where the ratio of guard to inmate is the ratio of inmate to guard is 40-1. And for the most part, these environments are policed unarmed, and so they are intense places that you can feel that you're in another world, and you can feel just how volatile it all is. In certain states, they require you to do these interviews behind glass, no, so-called no contact interviews. And in other states, you'll be 3 feet from the inmate. I always insist on a table between us as kind of last line of defense. But you just never know what to put past these people, and so we are, we go as soon as we hit the ground, right? It's basically a 3-day shoot. As soon as we hit the ground, we're at like a level 10 of our own anxiety, and as we're just managing the prep, managing the process. We've had cases where we get there, and the facility, has decided that it's it's outside the bounds of safety tolerance, or the inmate has changed his mind, and so this show is unique in that the shoot is the show. Right. If anything goes wrong and we don't get the interview, well, that's a whole episode, right? We can't just like substitute some other element of the storytelling for it. So it is very intense. I'm nervous. I'm trying to keep all the facts of the case in my head and straight. I'm under the gun. Sometimes we're literally on a stopwatch. Usually we'll get 60 minutes. And there'll be somebody there timing it, and so in that time you have to like break through the killer's spin and unwind the story and sort of lead them down a path to get them engaged, and then rake them over the coals if they either deny the crime or attempt to soften the severity of their actions, which is very often the case.
Yeah, I think that having been a person who used to be a defense lawyer going into those prisons where they would leave you in a room alone with the defendants for a significant period of time, and they have a button there, but for some reason it never rang. Um, I don't think people really understand. I think there's another side. Like you're saying this to me, I'm thinking to myself, people like you, myself, and Dave have had the opportunities of being in these facilities and the austerity and like the tension. A lot of people who get caught up in much minor offenses are actually living with these people. They're living under these circumstances, and they're living with people who have done these real. I think people would be shocked. They kind of think like they're segregated. They try to do that to a certain extent, but like, just give us your insights. And you must have walked away saying, "Oh my God, I couldn't even imagine ever being in here." But that must hit you in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about. We did an episode in the current season with a Texas inmate called Nicholas Camfield. I heard about his case from a warden in another Texas prison. After we did an interview in his facility, he said you should go interview Pickles, um, and um, and we looked it up. It's a chilling case, a case of what the forensic psychologists call overkill, when death itself isn't enough to satisfy the bloodlust of the killer, and then you see necrophilia. You see, in this case, cannibalism. It is probably the darkest interview that I've done. But when we arrived in Texarkana at this facility, we always go and pay respect to the warden, and when he realized who we were interviewing, he said, okay, and he actually ordered more staff because this guy has such a violent record in prison, including several armed assaults against guards. And so you could just see in the process of escorting this inmate in and out of the no contact booth, how at risk those guards are. And as you say, like, he's the highest category, right? But there will be multiple categories in that facility. And it's over subscribed by a lot. It's overcrowded and under resourced, and all that means, precarity of safety. And I left there really concerned about the men and women who have to supervise this guy, because it's just so obvious he would take any opportunity to take an eye out, or to attack a guard with a weapon. And just the process of seeing them, get him in and out. After the interview, he had to put his hands through this little slot in the metal door in the metal cage, where we saw him through plexiglass, and they have a way of cuffing him even before they open up the gate. And you could just read it on their faces, how just and a lot of them didn't know his story, and heard the story for the first time in our interview, supervising our interview. So imagine that, the guy's a bad guy, he's category 4 or whatever it is, but you don't know the details. Now you've heard the details, right, of how he's murdered his best friend with a pickaxe and then spent 3 days defiling the body. And you got to go in there and get him back to, to his unit, right? What a job.
Well, we kind of talked about this pre-show, right? And I know that the audience is going to find this probably a little, at least my opinion or statement, disarming or maybe inappropriate. But when I was a homicide prosecutor, there were bad guys or bad people that committed homicides. I shouldn't say guys. I had women as well. Bad people that did bad things. But I kind of understood. I could wrap my arms around it. I would never have done it myself, but there was a motive that made sense to me. And then there were those like what you're just saying right now, senseless, deeply evil people. Some of the people I prosecuted, I did it zealously. I got the conviction, but I kind of felt bad for them because I understood why they did. They deserved to be punished. But then there were others where I said, this person needs to be removed from society for as long as humanly possible. Does that sentiment make sense to you?
It does make sense. I mean, look, I recognize that there are, flaws in our system of criminal justice. But I've done 20 of these interviews, and there's not one that I would let out of prison and back into the
Wow.
community. And it's, it's a sorry state of affairs for all of us, because there are more and more I mean, there are more and more literally every day.
Mhm.
There are more and more murders in contemporary America, that we then have to, we have to segregate, isolate, and supervise for, in many cases, the rest of their lives, right? And in other cases, they are going to get out, and then who are they going to be when they get out? And
Mm.
it's I mean, you start thinking about just how um, just how vulnerable we all are,
Mm.
inside and outside of these facilities. But it's further convinced me of what was never really in doubt, that there are some people who need to be isolated from the rest of us.
Mm.
From a law enforcement perspective, I mean, what knowledge could be had from these types of conversations? Just recently, we saw the Rex Humerman case plea out, right? And part of his conditions of that plea was to cooperate with the FBI and interviews and things like that. So, I mean, obviously, 20 interviews deep. I mean, could probably help law enforcement too, with some of the intel received from these interviews.
Well, just to add to that, that's like in juxtaposition or in opposition to the disgrace of what they did in Koberger. I would have required as a prosecutor that you will fully debrief with law enforcement and psychologists or whatever. And if we believe you're telling us the truth and we can learn from these crimes, and they did nothing like that. So I think
Really?
that's a good distinction.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. Um, well, yes. I mean, I I strongly believe that to fight these crimes, we have to understand them, and unfortunately, sometimes some of the answers can only come from the killers, and so it's worth engaging them, trying to get into their heads and get out what lessons we can. I mean, that's why criminologists study this stuff, and forensic experts. They study these people, and what makes them tick, and what's made them, brought them to the brink of these crimes, and then the execution of these crimes. There's a whole methodology for studying that. We did Brian Stephen Smith, the serial killer in Alaska, who filmed his crimes. This is the most chilling thing I think I've ever seen, is the movie, quote unquote movie, he was making as he was murdering Kathleen Joe Henry. And why the need to document it, right?
Mm.
Why there's so many important questions that are, chilling and grim, but I think worth encountering. And that's a big part of why we do this show, to try and open a window onto this, dark but important, aspect of human life, and see if we can make more sense out of inexplicable, gory, brutal crimes.
Wow. I mean, new episode coming out on May 31st. You continue to produce new content. What's next? I mean, what's next level? I mean, as a journalist, I know you want to hit the next level up. You want to keep on improving and growing. Where do you go from here, David?
Yeah, great question. We're hoping for a season five. We're always trying to sort of get better at it. I think over the years, we have dialed in the former formula and our methods. I'd be, if I had my way, we'd have more would be able to be more selective about the cases. Um, um, you know, the permissions process is a real challenge, because there's so many layers. First of all, there's some states that don't allow these interviews at all, right? So that takes that sort of limits the universe, and then we have to cast a wide net to see, to get through the inmate's permission. Very often, the inmate is consulting family or their attorneys first. The institution has to agree. The State Department of Corrections has to agree. Then we have to hope that nothing happens in the facility that causes a disruption, and we've had so many cases where the inmate changes his mind. So it's not an easy show to produce, to book or produce. I would, I dream of being able to interview, more sort of serial killers, more pathological, cases and crimes, because I just do believe that there's an opportunity for us to, to learn from them, and in some way, the more we understand these crimes, the safer we can be if we're willing to, you know, to to try and intervene.
Yeah, I would say that my experience having also had a serial killer and dealing with a lot of the really bad murder cases has been there is a narcissistic, and I'm using that as a loose word, but I think a psychologist would come around and say the same thing. And part of that illness, and people that would videotape their things and take joy in watching somebody else's pain and wanting that level of notoriety, whether it's good or bad, doesn't make a difference. I'm thinking of BTK, is malingering or lying. It's a constant game of deception. They have appeals pending. They want attention, so they want the notoriety. But do you feel that they're always trying to manipulate and malinger to push to a justification?
Absolutely. There's so much of that. I mean, most of my interviews, most of the time is spent unwinding the spin. So next week's episode is a great example. Celeste Beer Johnson, for 25 years, she's been denying her role in the murder of her former husband. For 25 years, she's been going on, all the shows, and presenting herself as, sort of matronly and sweet and very innocent. And it's fascinating. And I think we she's never going to admit to the crime to us, but she does drop the mask, and we get to see, through the rigor of questioning, we get to see a side of Celeste Beer Johnson that she has not allowed the public to see before, and it is a chilling encounter. It's one of the two times that an inmate has walked out on us, but we were able to 5 months later, go back and resume the conversation. But to me, that's exactly what you're talking about. Narcissistic sociopath. She will go to her grave, concerned only about her own welfare, denying responsibility for her crimes, and and there, it's really scary to think about how many people like that, are out in the free world right now.
I just want to do a follow up. I later in life have gotten to the point where I've seen it so much that I'm not sure that it's lying anymore. I believe these people believe what they've made themselves believe it.
Could be. Yeah, I've heard that before. That they're. I mean, think about it. 25 years incarcerated in the bubble of your own mind, wanting it to be true, needing it to be true, right? Nobody's ever like come in and laid it out for you, right? And you're obsessed only with your own well-being. So
Mm.
I've heard that they can pass lie detector tests. That they believe so much in the alternate reality of their version of events, and it's one of the things that caused her to get really defensive and walk out. Was, and I said, it's almost like you're in an alternate reality. And she didn't like that at all. I think that was in and of itself like a narcissistic wound for her.
Yeah, you confronted the delusion.
Sure. Four seasons in, and a lot of people may not have seen this before. We've talked about a couple episodes unique, but is there one, if for someone that wants to just jump in and see one of the best, what would be that one that you would recommend?
Oh man, that's tough. That's tough.
They're all good, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to see, like, because we've learned, like, initially we thought the best or most successful episodes would be the ones where the killer bears his soul. And we had a 30-year-old guy who, when he was 17, butchered both his parents with a hammer, you know, for no apparent reason. It turns out there's this fascinating forensic phenomenon called catathymia crisis, where and it happens, sometimes to adolescents in particular because of the teenage brain, where they believe that the way to resolve inner conflict is through an extreme act of violence against somebody with whom they're closely bonded. That's why he attacked his parents. And he's, now 30, looking back, trying to make sense of it, trying to understand. I felt like, he might have been the one who most bared his soul to us. And I thought that was going to be the middle of the target. But the audience seems to like the process of dismantling the killer's story and psychology, the aggressive questioning, watching them squirm at times,
It's like how we are at trial.
being sort of brought to the court of public opinion for the purposes of justice, so it's really hard for me to pick one, but I would say that they're all up on YouTube for free. Don't limit yourself to one.
Yeah, why limit yourself to one when you have?
I just said a start. I mean, you got to start somewhere.
Yeah, so don't start with the guy that's remorseful and accepts his responsibility. Start with the guy who you're kicking his butt. That's the one you start with.
I'll tell you the one that was the most intimidating to me, even behind plexiglass in Texas, was a guy named Adam Curtis Williams, double homicide. He maintains that after a lifetime of violent crime, he's literally saw the light in prison when he pulled his Bible off the prison shelf, and the light literally came through and hit him. And he confesses to his crimes to me for the first time. It is very chilling. He's a large, powerful man with just a history of extreme violence, and even behind the glass, he gave me chills. But he also, confesses in detail, and I sometimes the reactions of the victims' families are so interesting and surprising. We always, as a part of our template, as a part of our formula, we always offer the victim's relative or other proxy an opportunity to come on and say their piece. We often show them the killer interview in advance, or at least excerpts of it, because I want them to know, that this was not just giving them a platform, an uncontroverted platform, which there are some other shows that they just let the killer speak. I think one is actually called The Killer Speaks. And once in a while, you'll hear a question off mic, off camera. Well, I don't understand that format. To me, it only works if we are there to hold them to account. So this was like I think a really interesting episode. It's one of the two-hour episodes that we've done. This one and the National Forest serial killer Gary Michael Hilton, both first-time interviews. Gary Hilton interview was I think newsworthy in that he confesses for the first time on camera to a crime that everybody knew he'd done, but he had never confessed to it or told how it happened. Anyway, there was where I was going with this was that the victims' relatives in the Adam Curtis Williams case actually got from it a sense of closure, because they never knew the details. They never knew, and while the details are grim and traumatizing, they had a need to know them. And they wrote us afterwards and they said, we got something out of this that we didn't expect to. They came on and said their piece, but they also got a sense of closure, and boy, that made us feel really purposeful.
David, Scott, listen, we're going to have to come back, because that's the turning point to Kohlberger that makes me sick to my stomach. and other cases, that the victims' families have to forever wonder because the prosecutors, you did it as a journalist, okay, but that wasn't done, and that is such an important piece. But unfortunately, our time is up. What an awesome interview. Really appreciate it. Nothing But the Truth podcast. Dave, how can they find us in this awesome interview?
Yeah, absolutely. Nothingbutthetruthpodcast.com is the landing page with all of our interviews, including David Scott. It's up on YouTube. Our podcast is available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. David, what an exceptional interview. Thank you for coming on Nothing But the Truth. And we will absolutely be following up with season 4, 5, and whatever it is you do.
We're binge watching.
There's plenty to talk about, David.
We're going to binge,
Thank
baby.
you so much for having me on. It was great to talk to you. It's so interesting the ways in which our respective careers intersect in this work, and I really enjoyed hearing about some of yours.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right.
We're the Bianchi Law Group, a team of former prosecutors and certified criminal trial attorneys.
But here's the thing. He put himself in a box when he said,
Relied on by CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, Law and Crime, and news leaders across the country for our criminal defense
In a
expertise.
search warrant, you have to have probable cause that a crime's been committed and there's evidence in a particular place.
When you need a law firm with courage, compassion, and the commitment to fight for you, call the Bianchi Law Group today.